Right, very good morning. In the previous class, we have studied about one-dimensional arrays. So, one-dimensional array are nothing but the collection of elements of same data type. If we declare an integer variable, we can store only integer type of data. That means only one element can be stored. But with the same name, if you want to store more than one name, then we go for using the arrays. Say if you write int a, it will declare only an integer variable which can hold only one element at a time. But with the same name, if you want to store 10 elements, then this is what is called as an array. This is normal variable. First one is in normal variable, whereas the second one is array variable. This is normal variable, this is array variable. And every one-dimensional array will be having the subscript value or index value, which is going to help in identifying the corresponding element. And the array index is assumed in programming that the array indexing will start from 0. It is assumed that array indexing will start from 0. So this is what we have discussed in the previous class. Now after one-dimensional arrays, let us see the implementation of two-dimensional arrays. So what a two-dimensional array indicates, it is nothing but the array of arrays. Two-dimensional arrays can be defined as array of arrays. That is specifically when we talk generically, that is multi-dimensional array. Multi-dimensional array means more than one dimension. So now we are talking about two-dimensional array. So how do we declare two-dimensional array? We are going to the general syntax for declaring two-dimensional array is we will write what type of array we are trying to declare and what is the name of that array, how many rows are there in that array and how many columns are there in that array. So row subscript is going to tell the number of rows and column subscript is going to tell about the number of columns present. So one example could be integer array which has a name called A and which has row subscript of 2 and column subscript of 2. That means it is a 2 by 2 array. It is a two-dimensional array which is containing 2 rows and 2 columns. What it indicates? This indicates there are 2 rows in the two-dimensional array. This indicates there are 2 columns in the two-dimensional array. We are declaring a two-dimensional array. Right? So when you declare two-dimensional array, the memory will be reserved for array of arrays. We will see here how the memory will get reserved. How do we initialize the two-dimensional array? So the general syntax for initialization is the name of the array and the specific row index number and the specific column index number and the element. That means this is the case if you want to initialize any one location of the array. That means any one location of the two-dimensional array, if you want to initialize, then we specify particular row number, then we specify particular column number. Then at that location, this element will be stored. That is what is specific element initialization. If you want to initialize all the elements in the two-dimensional arrays, the syntax is return type, that not return type, data type of the array, name of the array, and row subscript. That means how many rows are there in the array, column subscript, how many columns are there in the array, and equal to the total number of elements. Say for example, this is first one. Example for this first type category. What is that? For the two-dimensional array, we are trying to initialize the element at first column, first row and zeroth column with the value of 3. First row and zeroth column with the value of 3. That is A of 10 is equal to 3. The second initialization, what it says here is, see, always we are going to assume that the first square bracket, the first value in the first square bracket indicates or always points to rows. The second value in the second square bracket always points to columns. So this is what we have to know always in the two-dimensional arrays. Now the second initialization here is A of 2, 2. That means a two-dimensional array is being declared which consists of 2 rows and 2 columns. Which consists of 2 rows and 2 columns. That means for better understanding purpose, I will write the two-dimensional array here. So what is that two-dimensional array? That I'm just going to draw it. So this is what is two-dimensional array, and we know that indexing will start from 0. 0th index, first index, 0th column and first column, 0th column and first column. Right? This is how we have declared the array. Now after declaration of the array, we are providing initial values for that array. What are the initial values which are being provided? Initial values are 1, 2, 3 and 4. 1, 2, 3 and 4. How they will get initialized? So that is given here below. That means the very first element will occupy the location 0, 0. Array initialization or two-dimensional array initialization will be always done row-wise. First row from left to right, second row from left to right. That is how the initialization will be done. That means the element 1 will take the location A of 0, 0. That means element 1 will take the location A of 0, 0. Element 2 will occupy the location A of 0, 1. Element 2 will occupy the location A of 0, 1. Element 3 will occupy the location A of 1, 0. So element 3 will occupy the location A of 1, 0. Element 4 will be placed in the location A of 1, 1. So element 4 will be placed in the location A of 1, 1. So this is how the two-dimensional array will be initialized, and the same thing is given here. So this is wrongly typed in the textbook. Just ignore it. Right? A of 0, 0 will be placed. 1 will be placed in A of 0, 0. 2 in A of 0, 1. 3 in A of 1, 0. And A of 1, 1 will be having a value of 4. So this is what is 2D array initialized. 2D array after initialization. 2D array after initialization. That is initialized. Right? Now, similarly, how we find the size for a one-dimensional array, we can also find the size for two-dimensional array. We can also find the size for two-dimensional array. So that is also found in terms of bytes only. So like how we find the size of one-dimensional array by using size of number of elements into the size of the data type. Same way here, how many rows are there in the two-dimensional array? How many columns are there in the two-dimensional array, multiplied by what is the size of each data type. What is the size of each data type? Say for example, if you consider the same array, of size 2 cross 2, of 2 rows and 2 columns. So even though if you write like this statement, if I write A of 2, 2 is equal to 10, 20, 30, 40. So what happens here is how that array gets initialized is in this way. This is what happens. Index 0, index 1, index 0 and index 1. So these index will always point to, these are always columns and these are always rows. These are rows. So when you write like this, what happens? 10 will occupy this place as just now I explained. 20 will occupy this place. Then 30 here. Then 40 here. For our understanding purpose, we are showing these arrays like this. But in the memory, they the form of consecutive memory locations. They will be stored in the form of consecutive memory locations. So that is what this diagram is shown here. Consecutive memory locations. Now let us see how do we find the size of an array. The dimension of the array is there are 2 rows in the size, there are 2 columns in the size, and size of every element. That means every integer element will occupy 2 bytes of memory locations. That means it is 2 bytes of memory location. It is 2 bytes of memory locations. Right, every element will occupy 2 bytes of memory location. So the total memory will be 2 into 2 into 2 will be 8 bytes. So total size occupied by that 2-dimensional array is 8 bytes. Now how do we represent the arrays? So this representation was just for our understanding purpose. Now basically how the arrays are represented in the form of consecutive memory locations. In the form of consecutive memory locations. That means this one indicates A of 0, 0. A of 0, 1, A of 0, 0 is 10, A of 0, 1 is 20, A of 1, 0 is 30, A of 1, 1 is 40. So that is what these are the subscript values for the corresponding elements, and these are the elements which are stored in those locations. And the memory addresses are same like how we represent for the one-dimensional arrays. So B always indicates the base address. That means if they are stored in consecutive memory locations. 2-dimensional arrays are also stored in consecutive memory locations. Right? If it is starting at 100, that is, if you assume base address B as 100 and where 10 is stored, this array only I am representing in the form of memory locations. If B is 100, then B plus 2 address will be given for 20. What will be B plus 2? That is 102. Then 30 will get a location 104. Right? Then 40 will get a location 106. Right? This is how the 2-dimensional array is being stored. So if you look at this, this is very similar to 1-dimensional array only. But that we just ignore how actually they are being stored in the memory. But we concentrate on the specific index values. We concentrate on specific index values for storing and representing the 2-dimensional arrays. Let us see one example. Example is any problem? Mute yourself, all of you. Are you getting proper audio video quality? Can someone respond me? Can you hear my voice properly?
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Because there is poor network connectivity at my side, you may face some difficulties. Right? So using multi-dimensional arrays, we have to represent a 2-dimensional 2 cross 2 matrix, a matrix which consists of 2 rows and 2 columns. What we do in this program is we are just receiving elements from the programmer and storing those elements. This program 2.8. Is this font is visible to you? Can someone respond? Should I increase the font size? I hope this size is clearly visible. Right? So in this program, we see how the two-dimensional arrays will work. That is a matrix. Similar to this, we have one more program next: addition, multiplication, subtraction of all the operations on matrix. But if you know the functionality of two-dimensional arrays, how they are getting stored onto the memory, then the remaining programs you can understand. Include the required header file, beginning of the main function. Then this is where we declare the required variables, integer variables as well as the two-dimensional array variable. So what I'll do, I'll write I and give it some memory location, J and give it some memory location, then M of 2. That means M is a matrix or M is a two-dimensional array which has 2 rows and 2 columns. So the first square index always refers to first dimension. It always refers to first dimension, and this always refers to second dimension. This always refers to second dimension. So what it indicates, there are 2 rows in the matrix and 2 columns in the matrix. Right? So M I will try to show. That is the matrix which consists of 2 rows and 2 columns. 0, 1, 0, 1. So this is the two-dimensional matrix what we have declared, what we have obtained after declaration. That means after this line, this is what has happened after declaration. We have declared the required variables. Now this will simply clear the screen. Then we are asking user to enter the elements of the two-dimensional matrix. Give the elements, enter the elements of the two-dimensional matrix. Then let us make an assumption that user is giving this input 10, 20, 30 and 40. So these are the numbers what user or programmer is entering whenever you run this program. And as I said, these horizontal indexes will always point to rows and vertical indexes will always point to columns. So that's why we need 2 for loops. That's why we need 2 for loops. One outer for loop for pointing to row index and inner for loop for pointing to column index. Because now we are trying to read the elements of the two-dimensional matrix. We are trying to read elements of two-dimensional matrix. So I will be initialized to 0, initialize I to 0, and how the for loop works: initialization, condition checking, then modifier part. So after initialization, check the condition: is it true? Yes, I is 0, 0 is less than 2, condition is to enter into the for loop. Within the for loop, what we have, we execute all these things. Within the for loop, what we do here is all these statements are executed within the body of the for loop. All these statements are executed within the body of the for loop. That means for every index of I, all these statements will execute. For every index of I, all these statements will execute. Now, for I equal to 0, let us perform this entire execution of this body. Initialize J to 0. I will initialize J to 0. Check the condition. J is it what input we are giving, what input we have assumed. I'll write here so that I can show it here. So input assumption was 10, 20, 30 and 40. Input assumption is 10, 20, 30, 40. Now the condition is to enter into the for loop, and we are just simply printing this. We are giving message to user. That means enter M of 0, 0. This I will replace this format specifier. J will replace this format specifier. ultimately what it will print? It will print like m of 0, 0. It will print like m of 0, 0. That means it will give prompt to the user. Enter the m of 0, 0 element. So which element you are entering now? First element what we are entering is 10. And where that 10 has to be stored? 10 has to be stored at the location m of 0, 0. So that's what we are doing. We are reading one integer from the keyboard. We are reading one integer from the keyboard, and where we are storing? We are storing it at the address of m of ij. Class lima. We will store that number. We will read that number and store at the location I and j. So what is I? I is 0 and j is 0. At the location m of 0, 0, you store the number. What is that number? We are entering 10. So 10 will get stored. 10 will get stored. So next, this is where the thing which you should concentrate. Right? Now the interesting part is we have to increment the index value. What I will do, I'm facing some difficulties, jittery here. I'll just put off power of this video. Right? So now things will work properly from my end. Right? After this, what is the next part of the for loop? Always we execute the modifier part. What the modifier part is doing? We are incrementing the value of j. That means j will be incremented by 1. Now j becomes 1. After incrementing, what we do? We check the condition whether j is less than 2. J is 1. 1 is less than 2. Condition is true. Again enter into this inner for loop. Remember, we are still executing this inner for loop. We are not worrying about outer for loop now. Right? And once it is true, enter and prompt the user to enter what is I is 0, m of 0, what is j is 1. Enter the value which has to be stored at m of 0, 1. That means at this location, which value we are entering? Second number we are giving as 20. So that will be stored in the location where? At the address of m of 0, 1. M of 0, 1. Store that 20 at the address of m of 0th row first column. M of 0th row first column. So 20 will get stored here. 20 will get stored here. So after that what happens? And again the incrementation part has to be executed. Incrementation has to be executed. We will go for modifier part of the inner for loop. Increment the value of j. Now j becomes what? J becomes 2. The value of j will be incremented to 2. Check the condition. J, is it less than 2? No. J is equal to 2. So this is false now. Condition is false. And we will come out of the inner for loop. We will come out of the inner for loop. That means all the statements for the value of I0, for the value of I0, we have executed all the statements. Now we will go for incrementing the outer for loop. Now we are go for continuation of the outer for loop. Now again I should go for this modifier part, because that is how the for loop works. Initialization, condition checking, execute the body of the loop, then again go for modifier. So what we are doing in the modifier? In the modifier we are just incrementing the value of I by 1. Now value of I becomes 1. Value of I becomes 1. So after incrementing, check the condition whether I is less than 2. Is it true? Yes. 1 is less than 2. Condition is true. Enter into the for loop and execute all the statements present within the inner for loop. And now the inner for loop again, it works for this second row. Inner for loop works for the second row. Now what is the initialization for inner for loop? J is again initialized to 0. But now what is the I value? I value is 1. That means I is pointing to this row and j is pointing to these columns. J is pointing to these columns. Condition is true. Prompt the user to enter what? Percentage D, percentage D. That means I. What is the value of I? I is 1 and j is 0. That means the element which has to be stored at this location. first row and zeroth column. First row and zeroth column. That means you want to store element at this location. And which element you are entering? We are entering 30 as the next number. We are entering 30 as the next number. And you have to store it. What is the code for that? Store the entered number from the keyboard at the location, at the address of name of the array, ith row and jth column. What is I? I is 1. J is 0. So at the first row and zeroth column, store the number. What is that number? 30. So 30 will get stored. So after storing the inner for loop, what is the next part now? Next part is we have to go for incrementing. Increment the value of j. Now j becomes what? J becomes 1. Check the condition. 1 is less than 2. Yes, condition is true. Enter into the for loop and execute the statement. This will be prompted as it is. That is I is 1, j is also 1. And which element you are entering? We are entering element as 40. We are giving element as 40, and where that has to be stored? At the location of 1 1. That's what the statement says, at the address of m of ij. What is I? I is 1. What is j? J is also 1. M of 1 1 will get an element called 40. Right? So after this, we'll get an element called 40. Again, the looping is not yet over. Looping is not yet over. Now what happens? We'll go for incrementing. The value of j will be incremented. Now j becomes 2. Now j becomes 2. Check the condition. Is 2 is less than 2? No. The condition becomes false. We'll come out of the inner for loop. We'll come out of this for loop. We'll come out of this for loop. Now we'll go for the incrementing of the outer for loop. We have to go for incrementing of the outer for loop. That means this statement has to be executed. This statement has to be executed. We perform I plus plus. What is the value of I? Earlier value of I was 1. Now I becomes 2. Now I becomes 2. Check the condition after incrementing. Whether 2 is less than 2? No. It is false. Then we will come out of this outer for loop also. It is false. We will come out of this outer for loop also. Once we come out of the for loop, what we have done? We have successfully read the elements of 2D array. We have successfully read the elements of 2D array, and simply in the next statements we are just printing those values. That is matrix represented by 2D arrays. 2 into 2 2D array is this one. Outer for loop as it is from 0 to 2. Same, these loops are once again they are written. Just 0 to 2 it will iterate, and it will inner for loop will also iterate, and we are simply printing the value. That is percentage d m of ij. That is whatever matrix we have read, the same thing we are printing it. The only change here is, here we had included a scanf statement for scanning all the elements from the keyboard, and here we have, remember the reason why I am skipping this is there is no big difference. Outer for loop and again inner for loop, whatever I have discussed till now, that is same. The only thing is we are giving output to the screen, or we are displaying values onto the monitor. That's why it is printf. At this format specifier, store the values, display the values present here. It will also iterate from, first we'll display the value at 0 1, 0 0, then 0 1, then 1 0, then 1 1. Remember, in the printf statement we will not write the ampersand operator, whereas in scanf statement we will be writing the ampersand operator, which is already known to us. So this is how the two-dimensional arrays will work, and this is one of the sample output scenario. This is the sample output scenario of the matrix what we have discussed. In this example I took 10, 20, 30, 40, and here they have taken the elements called 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3 and 4. These elements were taken, and I'll try whether I can show the execution or not. Right. So this is what is the program which I explained just now. That is the working of two-dimensional arrays. The next concept what we have is strings, like how the integer array stores collection of integers, and floating point array stores set of floating point numbers. The character array will store the set of characters, and the collection of those characters is nothing but a string. Collection of characters is nothing but a string, and the strings are always ending with a null character. That means at the end of string will be stored by the null character. The general syntax for string is like this. What the syntax says: the data type, which particular data you want to process. The general syntax for strings is which particular data you are processing, which name you want to give to the string, and what is the size of that array. That means what is the size of that character array, and the set of characters what you want to store there. For example, obviously string means the data type will be always character, because string is nothing but collection of different characters. Str is name of the character array or string name, which has a size of 10. That means after this statement, how the array looks like here is, this is how it is implicit. Two, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 locations will be reserved. Right? Now the indexing will always start from 0, 1, 2 up to 10. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. Now, what is the name of this character array? Str is name of the character array. And in that location, remember, strings are always indicated within the double quote. And what we are trying to initialize that array by using hello, HELLO. Even though you write only this much, at the end \0 will be stored, null character will be stored. What it indicates here is it's going to indicate end of the string. It is going to indicate end of the string. Let us see the demonstration of the two-dimensional array. Now that system is up. One second, I may have to do some of the changes here. Right, we're just asking the user to enter the elements of the two-dimensional matrix, store them by using a true for loop. That's what we have discussed just now. Right. Right. In the printf statement, we're just trying to print those values. This is not the other program, the same program, whatever I explained just now. But it will not take double quotes usually. That's why I'm trying to rewrite it. Yes, this is a program. I'll just run the program and I'll try to show the output, or I'll try to demonstrate the execution, like how two-dimensional arrays will work. So all these are fundamentals and revision of C concepts. So by assuming that you need more explanation, so I'm going in a slower rate. I'm trying to cover as depth as possible. But second module onwards, I'll be increasing the pace. The speed will be increased. So enter the elements of the 2 cross 2 matrix. First Q the 0, 0. So what we took in our example, 10, 10. The next element was 20. The third element was 30. The fourth element was 40. And what it is print? The matrix represented by 2 cross 2 2D array is 10, 20, 30, 40. So why it is printing like this? So we have not given the space there in the program. If you give one space here after print, right? If you give one tab here, that will work. The output will be same. So 10, 20, 30 and 40. 40. So now you can see the output 10, 20, 30 and 40. Press any key to continue. So this is how the two-dimensional arrays work. And now coming to strings, continuation of the strings part. So the C compilers are providing a number of built-in functions that will help us to operate with the strings. So what are the built-in functions? To perform input-output operations. The string functions are get s, as s indicates string, get string. It is going to read a set of characters from the keyboard. Say for example, if you declare str as an array of size 50, then get s, read string, get string from the keyboard and store it in the variable str. Similarly, put s will display the characters onto the string. So these are the built-in functions. That means the definitions for those functions are already present in the C. You need not write. And there are some more string handling functions. strcat. What it does here is it is going to concatenate two strings. That means joining two strings. It adds one string at the end of other. For example, if the first string is hello and the second string is word, then the added string will be hello world. So that is what the concatenation works. String length, it's going to find the length of the string. That means how many characters are there in the string. CPY, strcpy, copy. It is going to copy the number of characters from one string to the another string. That is copy from one string to another string. Comparison, strcmp. What it does, it is going to compare two strings and tells whether they are equal or not. Two strings are equal to each other only when all the characters are same. If there are 10 characters in both the strings, then all those 10 characters must be same. So there are some other functions also, like reverse, getting substring, then copy only the n characters. So there are so many functions. Once you practice programming, you will learn all those functions. Right, the program demonstrating the reverse of a string. So this basically here is what we have to concentrate here is how the arrays will be stored. I think this is simple indexing. What I had to concentrate here is only these two functions. The remaining is again as usual the execution of for loop. So that is self-explanatory. Whatever for loop I have explained just now. We're just trying to find the reverse of a string. Right, getS of str, what it does here is it will read the string from the keyboard. So whatever you enter from the keyboard, if you enter computer will be scanned and that will be stored in the character array str. Character array str. That means what is this? Str is containing computer. The very next statement what it does, find the string length of str. What is the length of this str? So what is present in str? How many characters are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That means what will be the value present in length? Length will have a value of 8. And this is how the normal flow of for loop to find the reverse of a string. So that you can know it. Because wherever essential parts, wherever the similarity of the things will come, those parts I will be skipping. Now this is what is New Delhi, one input string, and after reversing this is how we'll get the output string. So this is one more program to concatenate two strings. To concatenate the program to concatenate or append two strings, one string at the end of other string. So string 1 of 40 characters, string 2 of 10 characters. So enter the first string and store it in a variable called str1. Say for example, str1 is equal to, I am giving computer. Actually, we should show, for understanding purpose, we should write the box for that. This I am not writing because I assume that we have understood those concepts. COMPUTER, right? After that we have the null character. Then enter the string 2, str2. Say for example it is science, SCIENCE, right? Computer science. I have taken one more example called computer science. Two strings are there. Now you have to add string 2 at the end of string 1, concatenation. So after concatenation, what will be the result? String 3 must be the result. What will get? Will get result like computer science. Right? What will be the concatenated string? Concatenated string will be computer science. Concatenated string will be computer science. So that's what we are doing. Just print those values. Percentage, yes, I am trying to print. What I am trying to print? See here, concatenation function is being called. What it does? Concatenate string 2 at the end of string 1. And what it says, how many characters you have to concatenate? String length of str2. What is the length of string 2? Length of string 2 is what? How many characters are there in string 2? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That means this is 7. So how this expression becomes now? Str of 1, comma, str of 2, comma. Then this is str cat. That is string concatenation. So what it tells here is, take 7 characters from the string 2 and append at the end of string 1. Even if you remove this part, it will take all the characters. That means take 7 characters from string 2 and append at the end of string 1, and remaining all functionalities are same. Here the comment in the box will give the clarification. Here we have called the string function directly from the printf statement. That means instead of writing so many lines, it is called directly from the printf. If you want, you can separate this. First execute this separately, string length, and store it in a variable called len. Then give that len here. So that is also same. So basically you can write the program in different ways, whatever you want. There was one program. For demonstration of string operations. Right, now let us see built-in functions, the set of built-in functions. So that means we have been using till now printf, scanf. So there are some other functions also, which are the definitions for those functions are already present in some of the header files. So they are called as built-in functions, which we are using in our programming. So these are so many built-in functions. Why we have to include stdio.h header file is, it is having definitions for so many built-in functions, which we'll be using one by one throughout the course. That is printf, fprintf dealing with files, scanf, getchar, getters, putchar. So all those functions are defined. The library.h file, std library.h file. So these many functions are defined in that one. String.h for string related built-in functions. Time.h for calculating time related aspects. Math.h for all the mathematical functions. If you want to use mathematical functions, you have to include math.h. And here we have included math.h function. This is one example here for finding the square root of a number. This is a simple program. What we are trying to do here is, we are asking user to enter a number. We are asking user to enter a number and display its square root, and just find its square root. Say if you have given number as, you have entered from keyboard 16, and what we do here is the built-in function. We are just invoking the built-in function. What is that? We are calling the built-in function square root. Where the definition of the square root is present? Definition of square root is present in math.h. So we just invoke the square root function. What it does? square root of number. What is present in number? 16. Square root of 16 is what? We all know that square root of 16 is 4. So what will be present in result? Result will be 4 and 4 will be displayed onto the screen. So basically square root of 16 is 4. That is how we use the built-in functions. If I keep on giving demonstrations, it will take some time. Right? So this is what is how we can use the set of built-in functions. So similarly, you can use random function. One more program is there for showing the how do we generate the random number. Basically, what we do is if you want to use built-in functions from the C library, you should include the corresponding header files. You should include the corresponding header files. Now, after built-in functions, next we have user-defined functions. That means other than the default functions which are available in the C library, if you want to create your own functions, they are called as user-defined functions. They are called as user-defined functions. Right? Now, we have been using one function till now called main. So main is also a predefined keyword which should not be used for other function definitions. So what user-defined functions? They are created by the programmer. We are free to create our own functions. So whenever you are trying to create the user-defined function, we should concentrate on these three aspects. What is the first aspect? Function declaration. First, we should declare the function. That means we should tell to the compiler that I am using this function in my program later. At the beginning of the, you should tell it to the compiler that I am using that function. That is what is called as function declaration, or it is also called as function prototyping. Function declaration or function prototyping. The second thing is you should embed a call to that function. After declaration, you should call that function. And once you call that function, you should have definition for that function. So these three are essential. Declaration of a function, call of a function, then definition of a function. These three are essential. The syntax for all these is, for prototype, what the function is returning, what is the name of the function, and what are the parameters it is taking. That is what is general syntax. What we tell to the compiler, this function is returning this data type and it is taking so many parameters, right? And the sample scenario, sample syntax for calling a function is which name of the function followed by the parameters. This is how we call the function. This RHS is nothing but function call. And once we call, whatever return value we get from that, that will be assigned to the variable. That will be assigned to the variable. So that is one example. General syntax for the function call. General syntax for the function call. First you write the prototype. Second you write the function call. Third is function definition, or it is also called as body of the function. Function definition, it is also called as body of the function. That means that is actually the place where the work will be done. That is actually is the place where the work will be done. So what is the return type of the function? What is the name of the function? And it will receive the parameters. That is parameter 1, parameter 2, so on up to parameter n. And the function definition will be always between opening bracket and the closing bracket. Function definition will be always between opening bracket and closing bracket. And these are set of statements. That means after execution of all these statements, this particular thing will be returned to the caller. This particular thing will be returned to the caller. Say for example, once we discuss the example, then it will be clear. function prototype. We are writing one prototype. What is that? Factorial is a function. Factorial is a function which will take one integer parameter and it's going to return the long integer as the output. The return type is long integer. Name of the function is factorial. What parameter it is taking? It is taking one parameter of type integer. That is what is function prototype. Now how we can call the function? Factorial, name of the function, opening bracket, closing bracket by passing the parameter. X is what here? X is a parameter. X is a parameter. And this is what is LHS. After executing this, the resultant value will be stored in the variable called fact. Resultant value will be stored in the variable called fact. That means if you know factorial of 3 is what? Factorial of 3 is 6. We know that. That means whatever value pass here, now it is going to call function definition. It is going to call function definition. So the third component is function definition. Factorial control will be transferred here and function definition will be called. So function definition, what it says, it return type, what it is returning after that, because after calculation it is returning factorial of the number. Factorial function is being called. And one more thing, here is a mistake in the textbook. It must be same. Whatever name you are using here, if you are writing factorial, this also must be factorial, because the function definitions will be searched in the source file based on the name and number and type of the parameter. So name must be same. This X will be passed and it will be placed in the value of n. And later on, this is what is the procedure for calculation of factorial, which is already known to us. How do we calculate factorial of a number? Factorial of, that is generic statement is factorial of 4 is given by 4 into 3 factorial. 3 factorial is given by what? 3 factorial is given by, this we calculate by using 3 into 2 factorial. 2 factorial we calculate by using a statement called 2 into 1 factorial. And 1 factorial is given by 1 into 0 factorial. So 0 factorial is 1 and this is how the return type will be calculated. So here simply what we want to know here is the 3 main components of a function. That is, first one is prototype, second one is function call, and third one is function definition. And whenever we are talking about functions, we should know all these 3 things. Now there is one sample program to calculate area of a rectangle. The sample program to calculate area of a rectangle. So what I'll do here is, I think in 2 minutes I'll complete this. We are just writing the prototype of the area and function call. The essential components are shown with the bold letters. L, length of the rectangle, B, breadth of the rectangle. We are asking user to enter the length and breadth of the rectangle and store them in the variables L and B. If you have entered L as 4 and B as 6, L as 4 and B as 6. And now here we are calling the function. What is that? This is function call. I am calling function area by passing L and B as the parameter. That means control will go to this definition of the function. From this point, control will transfer to the definition of this function L and B. What is present in L? In L we have 4. What is present in B? In B we have 6. And finally we calculate, because we know that area is given by L into B. Just multiply length and breadth. That's what is happening. In the function definition, we are simply printing, computing and displaying the area of the rectangle. The area of the rectangle is with this particular length and with this particular breadth is what? With this particular length and with this particular breadth is what? Just length into breadth. Length into breadth. So that is what the function requires. Prototype, function call, and this third component is what? This is not given. This is what is definition of the function. This is what is definition of the function. And this is how the user-defined functions can be used. So the basic difference between built-in functions and user-defined functions is Built-in functions are predefined in the standard C library. If you want to use those functions, you have to include the corresponding header files. Whereas user-defined functions are created or defined by the programmers. User-defined functions are created or defined by the programmers.